right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on episode 125 of Blowback, Exposing Imperial Decline. I've got my regular co-host, Ian Kummer, from a suburb in Moscow. And I've got a first-time special guest, Facebook friend, Patrick Corbett. And I have, I just messed up your title, but I know that you have an analysis blog on Substack called Black Mountain, Mike Mihajlovic, and I probably butchered that, Mike. But you've been on our program before, and I know you had a recent article about Syria, and I know you're working on another article that's supposed to be published on your Substack shortly, but I know you only have 20 minutes. And so I wanted to talk to you about a lot of things, but I don't mind starting. I mean, you mentioned right before the show that you're working on another piece, and it's, all about the breaking news about the assassinated general in Moscow, ostensibly by the Kiev, regime.
Yeah.
And what kind of a response could be coming from Russia regarding that? Could I just toss it to you and let you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me again. So Ukraine, especially SBU and GUR or GUR, they cross all borders. There is an unwritten rule. You're not assassinating your opponent, top military commanders in their country. They crossed that border. Then they previously crossed with attacking with the U.S. ATACMS missiles to inside Russian territory, old Russian territory. So Russia responded first, hitting their energy infrastructure. Now, I believe, and it's slowly but steadily going to the direction that Russia is going to hit command center. I believe that in famous CHZ 417 command bunker, which is 93 meters beneath Kiev, may be targeted with Oreshnik missile because they have capabilities with a kinetic projectile to simply penetrate the depth. And if they don't penetrate, they will create such a tremendous impact. It's a directional focused energy. They will create shock waves, cylindrical shock waves that they may simply make that structure so weak or destroy any support function so that bunker will be useless. And also, they have that famous tunnel. They have two entrances from the Ukrainian government buildings. Those are hidden in some support structures, but there is a very thick concrete roof on those bunkers. Oreshnik can go to that concrete roof like a hot knife through the butter, because there is 4,000 degrees temperature, moving 3.5 kilometers per second or 10 Mach. Concrete is going to evaporate in that point, and sheer inertia and momentum plus energy. Concentrated energy, it will create such an impact of, let's say, equivalent to 7.5 tons of explosives. So it will simply tear anything on its way down the road to the bunker. The bunker itself, there is two different bunkers actually. There is Block A and Block B. Block A is command post. I believe there is 3 levels. It's housing integrated air defense command, the army command, Zelensky's offices, other politician offices, and Block B is a support. It's a filtration system, diesel generators, then the drainage system, because there is underground water. So that system needs to work all the time. If one of those Oreshnik warheads hit anything, for instance, that Block B, or incapacitated Block B, well, basically for the bunker is over because they don't have any other ways of support. They have the third entrance to the underground subway, to the subway station. It's Arsenalna station between Kreshchatik in the downtown and Arsenalna. There is an entrance. But also, I discussed that in the article. If Russia hit the Dnipro station, which is right by the Dnipro River on the bank, water can get in, and you have that water that will pour down, plus underground water. So there are options, and Russia is not going to easy Ukraine because of this assassination of general. I'm thinking this. I thought actually this morning that maybe they even try Maria Zakharova assassination, or some of those really top public faces. But that will be end for you. That will be the end.
When I was butchering your introduction, I forgot to explain your expertise. So could you just remind us? I mean, I know it's regarding missiles and things like that.
Well, I'm a military technology expert. Weapons are my specialty. Missile systems, ballistic missiles, warhead explosions, technical aspect of that, engineering of that. So it's my field of knowledge and my field of work. So and also tactics. I'm former military officer. I started in Canadian forces and also in former Yugoslavian armed forces. I'm an officer. I was captain.
On our last episode, I was talking about the capacity of the Oreshnik missile to penetrate deep and to destroy command centers and things like that. But it's also Carlo brought out or somebody brought out that it's really has a wide area of destruction, right? Like, do you know the specs for that? Like,
no, but nobody in the public knows the spec, because they can use actually one warhead, they can use 3, they can use 6, and those 6, they can also have a small warhead within. So 6 can be 36 small one. Each can have a yield of 250 kilograms of explosives. But this depends. It's so versatile stuff. And so many things are unknown. There's a lot of speculations, but it's kinetic. The sheer kinetic impact in energy. It's a directional focused energy. It will simply go through everything. Bear in mind, this is special alloy, special steel, special materials developed, which are really, really top secret. That materials are something that Russia is really keeping so secret that nobody have idea what is that really. But material can hold 4,000 degrees. What that can be? I mean, metallurgists can help with that. But this is amazing. This is amazing weapon.
Yeah. The main thing is that there have been. I mean, we're talking about the weapons. They have the weapons for decapitation strikes, as NATO likes to say. But Ukraine, this is not the first terrorist attack. It's not even the first car bombing that Ukraine has done. And Russia has not responded in that way in the past. So I guess the question is, would this...
Yeah, I believe they will do something. Because
they'll do something, but they haven't done what you're describing, essentially. I mean, the Ukrainian government's still operating in the open. The state Rada is still operating in the open. They've not dismantled the Ukrainian government like that.
Government is basically Zelensky. And Zelensky, with his behavior, he is actually making favor to Russia because he is dismantling his own country. I would say that maybe Russia, I believe their intelligence is really, really strong. If they can, for instance, locate Kirill Budenov and the boss of GOR or SBU, the other boss of SBU, so if they can locate them, because those guys are fanatics, if they can eliminate them, Zelensky is he's just a pawn. But those and also those two guys, and also NATO High Command Center, which is located in that CH-417, high-ranking NATO officers, generals, colonels, lieutenant colonels, they are there, and all communications, programming stuff for the missiles, ballistic missiles, links, communication, everything is going through one of those centers. This one, CHZ-417, is the deepest one. There was one in Lviv, but that was hit before. So there's a couple of them, but this one is the toughest one. So if Russia can simply wipe out that or damage that stuff and cause casualties among the NATO personnel there, those top one, that will be really, really the big hit. Russia may not decide to do that. Russia may simply level the energy infrastructure. So level whatever is left But see what is going on now. They hit Ukrainian energy infrastructure, but now Ukrainians they're begging EU to send them electricity to export electricity to Ukraine. Now that creates stress to the EU. So see that logic. Russia is hitting, but not destroying completely. So Ukraine is begging now EU to, from their resources, push the stuff to Ukraine. So creating additional strain to the EU, which is weak already. It is a long game, but we'll see. I would like to see really that bunker eliminated, but maybe they will simply decide to level one of those energy transfer stations, let's say 750 kilovolt transformers. With that, basically, it is the end of energy in Ukraine. So they will go back to using the wood and whatever coal they have.
I remember seeing the images of the previous Oreshnik strike, and it was, I've never seen anything like that. And so you're describing that as, 4,000 degrees of direct energy.
Yeah, moving 10 Mach.
And we don't know even if there's explosives within those weapons. It could just be
it's a kinetic. It's kinetic one.
Yeah, kinetic
those were without explosive, but they can put mini nukes or macro nukes in that. In the Dnipropetrovsk, in that Yuzhnoye plant, they hit underground bunkers where the workshops are located. You don't see explosions, but people on the side, they said it was a tremendous shocks in Dnipro, and they heard explosions after that for several hours. So probably they hit something what was stored beneath. Suddenly after that, one Canadian lieutenant colonel died in Brussels. Doesn't sound reasonable, but it's what it is. So after every Russian attack, you hear that somebody broke his neck on hiking or crashed his private airplane or something like that.
So your article, so in the description of the video here of the live stream, I published your article on Syria. It was pretty good explaining, what happened with, everybody was really surprised how quickly Syria fell. And then
it was a deal. It was deal made behind. Assad was basically eliminated on the way that was the best for him. So he went to Russia. Syria fell in disrepair. Syrian army was destroyed, and the winner is Israel. But Israel is going. They're occupying Golan. Golan is finished, so they will occupy territories where the Druzes are located. Turkey is biting something that they can swallow. The problem is Turkish economy is weak. Now they have to support additional half of Syria they now control. The other side, the U.S. is plundering. U.S. government is plundering all natural resources, or at least 80% of natural resources in Syria. So, but regarding to Israel, the only serious opponent with considerable air defense and heavy weapons stocks was Syria. Now that doesn't exist anymore. Taking Golan Heights and taking Mount Hermon, Israelis now they can put a radar on top of that mountain, so that basically radar looking down, and they can cover the whole southern of Lebanon, just controlling the remaining Hezbollah with their launches. And I believe that not so distant future they may even try incursion to get to the basically to cut off Lebanon, those southern part of Lebanon where the Hezbollah is still strong. Time will tell anyway. But the winner in this case is Netanyahu. And when you pull the line from October 7th, let's assume that it was not a staged one. It was a genuine attack by Hezbollah by Hamas who had enough. But Netanyahu actually played that on the way, so that now they leveled Gaza. They took half of they took actually the whole Golan. They destroyed the strongest opponent in Levant. So they're basically the winner. They're in charge. Jordanians are useless regarding to any opposition to Israel. Saudis, they will make a deal with whoever they want, just to make some profit for their royalties, to say. So yeah, and basically Israelis are now the winners. But now as they eliminated Syrian air defense, they can simply do in the case if they decide to go against Iran, Syrian airspace is open for them.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. I mean,
Yeah.
do you foresee an imminent real regime change operation, like a military regime change operation against Iran, or do you see that they're just going to take their time?
Yeah, it will take a time. They're going to use opposition within Iran. Mossad has a really, really strong presence there. They will do from that side. They will try to do economic sanctions. But the biggest problem for Israel now is Yemen, Yemeni Houthis, and those guys, they don't give us for anything. They will continue to fight, and they know how to fight. So I believe the next step will not be Iran, but the U.S. Will help Israel, and NATO will chip in a little bit to try to neutralize that threat on the Red Sea, area.
So you'll see an attack on Yemen before they go after Iran.
It's a military attack on Yemen's infrastructure before Iran. They will try to strangle Iran slowly but steady. It's not something that will happen overnight, but they're working on that. They're working hard on that.
What can Russia do to support Yemen or Iran?
Depends what was the deal behind for Syria. For Russia, it's important to get rid of Zelensky, to finish with Ukraine, and probably there is a deal behind. We don't know details, but there is a deal. So Levant area, Middle East, it will be under the U.S.-Israeli control. Ukraine, they will let them down the drain sooner or later. Europe will just bark, but they're useless anyway. So Iran is something that provide Russia with exit to the warm waters, and they will not let Iran go.
But you think the Russian bases in Syria they're going to have to leave those?
Yeah, no, they will not leave it. They will keep that because this is Alawite Muslim population there. So probably when Syria is butchered completely, that area will be under the Russian influence. They will not keep like a strong combat forces there like that they have now, but they will keep, I believe, both Hmeimim and Tartus bases in the cooperation with Turkey. They will also probably have a base on the Iranian coast in the Gulf, and they will probably also have something in Libya or Algeria. But behind this is a political deal. So Israel will have a control over Levant area, so Syrian airspace, Middle East. I believe that Hezbollah will slowly but steady go down, but it will not be eradicated completely. They will not be destroyed. Hamas, Gaza, sooner or later will be simply uninhabitable space, unfortunately. So there are deals behind. It's not over yet. It's going to next several years will be interesting to watch what deals can be made between those powers and the zones of influences.
Mike, you've given us a lot of food for thought in the short 20 minutes. I know you have some work you have to get to, but I appreciate your analysis, and then we're going to definitely have you back soon.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thanks again.
You're welcome. Okay.
Patrick and Ian. So where would we like to begin our discussion? A lot of different threads we can pick up on, and it's hard to pick one area to discuss.
Well, you led with the dismantling of Levant. That's the title of the show. So do you want to start with that?
Yeah. So what are your thoughts? And I did link to your blog spot as well, Ian, in the description, so people can go there. You've written a few things. You had a prescient on the 9th of December. You wrote about how it didn't look good for Syria, and that turned out to be absolutely correct.
Yes, and so there's a couple of things. So the big one is that that 10 years, I mean, more than 10 years of pressure of, like Mike mentioned, depriving Syria of the bulk of their energy and food, their wheat, which of course impoverishes the country, but also drives up prices because there's domestic consumption as well. Fuel prices, what you can actually buy with local wages. There were stories about that people can barely afford food or even fuel for their vehicles, or even just basic stuff like that. So Syria did get pushed to actually being a failed state, and it didn't need much military pressure to collapse. It was already hollowed out. The Syrian Arab army just disintegrated, which means that the collapse really happened even before the HTS attacked Aleppo and did that big offensive. It was just.
And I think that's where. Sorry, I was going to say.
Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's where a lot of the propaganda came in. I saw so many posts about stop criticizing Syria for being weak and things like this. It's Syria is still strong, and the army is prepared to do what they did before, and that just wasn't true. And I think it was fomented partly by the West to blindside them. I mean, I must say that I was reluctantly impressed with their geopolitics.
Well, the main thing, is a couple of points. I mean, there was criticism because, I think for one, it caught a lot of people by surprise because it's been years since Syria was really in the news. When was, I don't unfortunately remember the exact year the ceasefire was. I think it was 2018, 2000, or was it later than that? But anyways, there was a ceasefire, then Ukraine, all that started, and people were paying attention to that. And then there was Gaza, all this other stuff happened. People kind of stopped paying attention to Syria. And after the fact, after the collapse, there was criticisms like, there was that offer by Russia to upgrade their inventory, their military inventory. There were complaints about Assad replacing generals who had distinguished themselves in the war. He'd replace them. There's a lot of criticism, but I think the big thing is, especially buying new weapons, that requires money, and Syria might have just not, even if they wanted to buy Russian equipment, they couldn't. And the problem we have now is that Syria is completely demilitarized. It's totally demilitarized. The military deserted all of their posts, and then Israel and the U.S. Air Force swept through and destroyed everything. All of that that concentration of air defenses in particular is all gone. So I don't think that's trivial that Israel can fly through Syrian airspace now unopposed and bomb Iran if they want to. And I find the pro-regime change crowd particularly hypocritical in this regard, because as of right now, anyone who wants a piece of Syria can have it. It's a fire sale. If you want a piece of Syria, now is your time to get it. They have no military. They have no defenses. If Turkey or Israel or whoever wants a piece, they can have it. And there's nothing stopping them from doing that.
Yeah, very surprising how they collapsed so quickly, and obviously it was related to the sanctions. And there was reports that the generals are getting paid like $50 a month, and no general's gonna be okay with that. And then that opens them up to bribery, and who knows, there could have been Mossad infiltration or Turkish infiltration, and they could have had agreements from these generals to stand down regardless of what kind of orders were given. I will never know in all likelihood. But definitely a disaster and a big win for Israel, and it increases their strategic objectives. I mean, having access to that one mountain where they can put radar on is big, because it makes it much more difficult to get missiles and things like that into missiles and drones into Israel, from Yemen or from Iran. So yeah, it's definitely not good. But yeah, what are the ultimate ramifications going to be remain to be seen. I mean, Iran seems to be obviously if Iran goes out like Syria went out, then I mean that's just bad for humanity, and it's bad for the struggle against the West, and it's bad for Russia, bad for China. Syria is a much smaller cog in that machinery, but yeah, now Iran seems more susceptible, more exposed, and weaker.
Well, go ahead, Patrick. Sounds like you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, I was just saying, it's if you look back at that, who was the general who reported that the Pentagon had said they were going to take out 7 countries in 5 years or something like that. It's curious to me, always has been, that a guy in a senior military position like that would just go all loose lips and tell us something like that, unless they didn't want us to know it. And he, as a general, I mean, I came from a military family, so military tactics and things were talked about a lot in my family. And I just wonder if what the purpose of that was. I don't claim to know, but the most people, I think, sort of were lulled by subsequent events into thinking this plan wasn't really followed, but it was, and all of their geopolitical moves are about picking off countries like Libya and leaders like Assad who stood up against them. And it's hard to see, especially just think back to a few weeks, a few months after they started the the bombing and the genocide in Palestine. There was a lot of talk by people like his name just Scott Ritter, about, well, this is the beginning of the end for Israel. Well, clearly it isn't, so why are we led to believe that? The issue for the resistance now has to be how not to let the rest of them get picked off. And I really would like to be a fly on the wall in China and hear what their strategic discussions are.
Well,
Yeah,
the thing with
Wesley
Israel,
Clark was the general that said 7 countries in 7 years.
Oh, unfortunately I would have to look.
No, Wesley Clark.
Yes.
Wesley Clark. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's a conspiracy. I mean, once someone's retired, getting those guys to not say anything. And I think that was before Congress. I want to say that was in front of Congress. I want to say there was some provocation that had led to him saying that as well. But as far as Israel goes, I mean, so Scott Ritter, I like the guy. I do think he delves a little too deep into sensationalism sometimes. So I think he might be overestimating how fast Israel comes apart. But I do think it's true. It's not even controversial to say they're on borrowed time, and being more aggressive. I mean, when a state is in peril, it's not at all historically unprecedented for them to become more aggressive when they're having that existential crisis. I mean, there's a lot of historical precedent for that.
What do you think is the primary existential threat
Well,
to Israel?
I would say that, I mean, well, the problem with Israel is that it was never, I mean, they had a lot of opportunities to become self-sufficient, but because of their own aggression, they've never become self-sufficient. They are extremely dependent on the USA and Western countries. And the problem with that is that the PR war, they're losing it's not happening fast. I'm a little amazed they kept it going this long, but they are losing the PR war. I mean, people the boomer generation, the Gen X generation, millennials, Zoomers, especially, just each subsequent generation of people supports Israel less and less. And, the thing is, people don't live forever. They die eventually. I mean, it's brutal to say, but eventually there's just going, I mean, I'm sorry, but people don't live forever. Yeah.
You had to remind me, didn't you?
But the pro-Israel public support is eventually going to be so low, it doesn't matter how much AIPAC lobbies. People are just going to be absolutely against giving them another cent. And I think we'll see that within the next 20 years. And the other thing is this recent, after October 7th, I mean, I was astonished. Like I wrote about it even at the time. I was like, okay, Israel's going to do some sort of military operation for a couple months at the absolute most. Say, hey, look, we have a victory. We crushed Hamas. We kicked their asses, blah, blah, blah. We got the hostages back and declare victory. And I think that would have actually been the smart thing for them to do. What wasn't smart, and I think a lot of this can be pinned on Netanyahu, just realizing as long as the war is going, he's safe from being removed from power. But it's not doing good. I mean, constantly conscripting people, constantly having the country, the whole country, because it's not a big country. I mean, Russia can eat a war and people live normally, but when you're a small country like Israel, where it's just the whole population is subjected to air raid warnings, or not air raid, incoming rocket warnings, conscription, their economy is a mess because no sane person is going to go on vacation in Israel. Jewish people who they encourage to immigrate to Israel are not going to want to immigrate to Israel in the middle of a war, and also knowing the economy is a wreck. I mean, even if you did immigrate to Israel, the only job you would get is being immediately conscripted into the army to go fight in Gaza or occupy Syria, apparently. It's just, and who, even after it's over, it's like, okay, the war in Gaza is over. Who is going to be in a hurry to go to more concerts and vacations in Israel when it could just flare up again? So economically, this is not going to leave them in a good position. I just don't think. I think the problem is the extreme. They're so extreme. Like, it really does seem. Everything I read, just the average person on the street is just crazy with the anti-Palestinian rhetoric, the Islam, anti-Arab, even anti-Christian rhetoric is just, they become more and more and more extreme. And unfortunately, someone who thinks, when your mind is so poisoned by hyper ethno-nationalism like that, it doesn't help you make good decisions. So no, I don't think the future is looking good for Israel at this point.
And go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I'm just interested in what your take is on the people who say that AIPAC is running the U.S. Which I personally don't. I mean, obviously, that's a great control mechanism, but I think on top of Israel's control mechanism, you have the United States. Yeah, they're a very nasty attack dog, and they've got to be. It's difficult to leash them in sometimes, but I think that's what they're doing. But I'm interested in your take on that.
Well, so it's a good question, and I think what often happens is when people hear about Israel control. Because yes, there is that anti-Semitic conspiracy theory of Israel and Israelis. I don't want to say the keywords. I'll get this YouTube video deleted, even when I'm disagreeing with it. But there is that conspiracy theory of them controlling, the whole world. And I think even when people hear stuff about Israel, the tail wagging the dog, they tend to think of that. I think there is truth to the tail wagging the dog, though not to that extreme. That is a conspiracy of Israel controlling the whole world like a puppet. I think and so with the United States, the problem with the United States is we have a lot of these enclaves of voters and lobbyists from other countries that come here and punch out, because that's actually another problem. We have a very resilient political system, but it does allow groups of single issue voters to punch outside, to punch above their weight. So if you're a Cuban exile who fled after you lost all of your slaves in Cuba and you're mad about it, if you're living in Florida, and there's actually several states where Cubans have a large population. Both parties are afraid of them because I think no politician in either party is going to really sit there and say, why do we have Cuban sanctions? That doesn't make any sense because they're afraid of the Cuban lobby. Same thing with that wave of immigration from Eastern Europe after World War II. You have all these people from Poland and Ukraine, the Baltic states, and more of them came after the Soviet periods too. And they tend to be single issue voters, and they punch above their weight because anytime some issue in Eastern Europe, like Russia or with Yugoslavia, Clinton bombed Yugoslavia in large part because particularly in the Midwest, you have very large numbers of people from Eastern Europe who are very anti-Russian, anti-Serb, and just say, bomb the hell out of him. So he bombed the hell out of them. So when you have Israel, I think Israel, that lobby is very well organized, even in comparison to the other lobbies. And so they can really manipulate the system in their favor. And the problem with saying, I don't support Israel, it's more trouble than it's worth. It's like fighting the lobby is harder than to just go along with it. I think that's a big problem for any politician. Even Biden, I think there is something to be said that Democrats actually preferred, literally, they preferred losing an election over not supporting Israel. I think it's actually amazing when you think about it, because I'd say at least, it's hard to say, but at least part of that low voter turnout was people just disgusted that Biden was continuing to funnel money and bombs to Israel. And that hurt him more because Trump, of course, I would say is equal or even more of a Zionist than Biden. But let's face it, Trump can say, I love Israel, send troops to Israel and not politically suffer for it. But Biden, who has leftist voters, Muslim voters, non-white voters in general, that hurt him more. But he was fine with losing. Kamala Harris was fine with losing, rather than saying, you know what, we're going to cut off. I mean, Kamala Harris had the power to do that as the vice president. She could say, you know what, I'm the vice president. I'm pushing for an end to the war now, even before the election. She could have done that. And she probably would have commanded a lot of respect for, okay, I don't like Kamala. I don't think she's very smart, or, all these criticism of Kamala, but, she did step up to the plate for Gaza. That would have helped her, but she didn't. So, and I also want to go ahead.
Yeah. Well, she kind of, everybody was surprised that she didn't pick the Jewish governor from Pennsylvania as her, oh
gosh, what's his name? Newsom.
Vice president. And so in that way, she kind of did pander to the pro-Palestinian people a little bit by not picking him and going with.
I don't know why they picked Waltz. It's like each person they pick for a leadership position is more absurd and unqualified than.
I mean, he's like a Bernie Sanders who's palatable to the oligarchs. He kind of has that pro-worker, aura about him, but he's not legitimately pro-worker like Sanders is. And so that's why they thought they would pander to these, the working class, the white working class. And, it's just, there was no chance of them winning.
I want to say there's other, it's not just the USA suffers from the tail wagging the dog. I mean, there's other examples. I would say even Russia in Ukraine is an example to an extent of the tail wagging the dog, because you have those separatists in what used to be Eastern Ukraine who just did not, after the Maidan Revolution, just did not want to be part of Ukraine, and they didn't even want to negotiate. Like, if you talk to them, they didn't even want to negotiate on the issue. They wouldn't have even been happy with being autonomous states within Ukraine. They just wanted to be part of Russia. That was the solution they wanted. Meanwhile, you had the Russian government itself, who was not excited to have that problem. Russia always just wanted good relations with Ukraine. It obviously is already the largest, even after the loss of the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union. It's still the largest country in the world. They don't need more territory. So they just said, we just want you guys to play nice with each other, So they were really, I would say, actually at odds with the separatist movement, despite all the propaganda. I know that's the talking point in Western countries, that the separatist movement is not legitimate. It wasn't sincere. It was just Russian soldiers in disguise. But first, it's not true. There were people who grew up in Ukraine who just did not want to be a part of Ukraine anymore. And at the end, it wasn't just because of the separatists fighting and the separatist lobbying. Russia was eventually just forced to take those territories in. So in the end, the tail got its way. They did get to become a part of Russia like they wanted. There were other factors. There were other factors, but ultimately they did get their way.
And so you're drawing parallels between how, different factions and different groups can wield influence within these, the governments of these big countries. And I can't really disagree with anything you're saying. And I kind of have the same perspective. I see that, if we're going to divide society between, an elite and the masses, which that's kind of Mark's approach to things, and he explains how the ownership class struggles to have political power. And so, but of course, it's not just owners. It's not just whoever owns the gas station down the street or the mom and pop store. Like, these aren't the owners. It's really the elites, right? The wealthy elites. But there are different lobbyists. So there's a lot of billionaire Zionists that are one issue people, and so their issue is Israel. And then there's other billionaires and powerful factions within the ruling establishment, such as the military-industrial complex, arms manufacturers. So, and it's kind of a tug of war between all these groups of elites to come up with a policy. And I think, definitely the Israel lobby was a decisive factor in putting the election towards Trump, because Kamala wasn't giving enough lip service to the Palestinians, or to Israel. Trump was way more pro-Israel in his rhetoric and his actions when he was president for 4 years. And it's always been the Democrats that were reticent to give full-throated support of Israel. So Barack Obama, of course, was hated by the Zionist lobby. Even though he gave them everything, they still didn't like him and they wanted him out. And he, the very last thing he did was to block or to not block. So usually he'll block the Security Council resolutions that condemn Israel, and he did not block it on his way out, which was like a big FU. But that's just so meaningless in a sense. But we're trying to figure out the how power works, how policy is decided, and that's my best explanation, is that it's just various factions within the ruling establishment vying for power, and there's a process, and eventually there's a winner, and the policy is decided. And Patrick, what about you? Do you have a conception, a framework that you use to try and understand how policy is decided, how strategy is devised?
Well, yes, I do, and it frays around the edges sometimes, but it's very much like you decided, or like you explained. I mean, I see it in Marxist terms that you have a ruling class that is really centered within the controlling heights of the economy, so within military industrial, but add into that the media is a very important part of it. And there is, I think, a long stretch of media control through the oligarchy, and they'll go to some extent to bend with the as Ian says, the excuse me, with the power of the lobby groups and things like that. But I don't think that they ever control it. I think it is top down control, and there is within that, excuse me for sounding like a conspiracy theorist, but there is, they think long term. They're like, even Ian just mentioned briefly a little while ago, the 20-year that Israel might take 20 years to do this. Well, 20 years in most people's lifetime is a pretty significant amount. But in terms of the ruling elite, the ruling class, which I prefer to call them because it is a class, is content to, are not content, but they see it in their interests to plan very long term. And you can give stuff away, like let's look at Serbia, for instance, and Clinton's attack. I don't think that that Yugoslavia was attacked so much because there were anti-communist enemies from the Eastern Bloc countries, as much as that breaking up Yugoslavia was part of their geopolitical strategy, and in order to do that, they mobilized very real feelings on the part of people, who had immigrated from previous communist countries and Eastern Bloc countries.
It would have been great to hear Mike's take, because I think Mike, our previous guest, he participated, I think, with the Serbian army, but Yugoslavia, it was the first big move that the West did after the dismantling of the Soviet Union, and alongside with that was a grab in Africa with getting what's his name, Kagame, in charge in Rwanda, was another big imperial move. They really, once the Soviet Union dismantled, the West just went all out to dominate and attain global hegemony, which is of course what they're involved in trying to maintain, in the face of rising China, rising Russia.
There is, well, I was going to say, it's money is not the only thing that motivates people. And I think that's part of the mistake the USA made. Wilson made that mistake when he took us into World War I. Truman doubled down on that mistake after World War II. And it's just gotten worse since then, because, it is true. We are a country of immigrants, and those ethnic loyalties and feelings kind of dissolve after for the most part, not always, but for the most part, dissolve after a generation or two in the USA. So we're not really, we think in terms of white people and black people and Hispanic people. We don't really think, for the most part, think as Italians and Poles. I mean, some do, but for the most part. And so we're kind of, European tribalism is very alien to us. And so we don't really understand what we're doing when we intervene in European affairs, and I see this from reading European authors online. Did you mean to do that, Billy Bob? Is that
not yet? I didn't mean to do that, but you did remind me of this clip that I want to play. But continue your point.
Yes, I was going to say, so when I talk to people from the UK, from Germany, particularly Germany, for some reason, I mean, they hate. I wish I could even think of a stronger word than hate, but they hate the Balkans. You see this like in World War I, what the Italian army did in the Balkans in World War I was terrible. It wasn't really any less extreme than what the Nazis did in World War II. And of course, what breaking up, I think they just wanted, just on print, there wasn't even necessarily even any higher motive for it than they just wanted to bomb the Serbs. They wanted to bomb Belgrade. They wanted to break up the country. And it's the same thing with Russia, because there was a lot of hatred for the Soviet Union in in the United States, especially from right-leaning and conservative people. But after the end of the Cold War, most of those people stopped hating Russians because there was no reason. It's like, why? Russia, I think any reasonable person knows that at this point. Russia is not a communist country. So it's like, well, why hate Russia? Why consider them an enemy? I remember even, this was several years ago. This was in 2021. This was like in the fall of 2021, where Tucker Carlson was interviewing some guy from the Biden administration. I don't remember if it was Sullivan or someone else, but he was interviewing this guy, and he was like, the guy's going on about how we have to support Ukraine against Russia. And Tucker asked, well, why does Russia need an enemy? Why can't we just be allies? That was literally what he had. The guy's head looked like he was going to explode. I think what Tucker's was voicing the opinion of most conservative Americans is like, why be at war with Russia? But Europeans is different. It's not even about communism or geopolitics. They hate Russians as an ethnic group. There's not even, and I don't think there's even any particular political or economic motive to it. To be honest,
I mean, and you're kind of ascribing this to an organic, natural thing, but I think, people's opinions and perceptions are absolutely manufactured. And so, like you said, in the U.S., we opposed Russia, and then when the Soviet Union dismantled, suddenly we didn't. But I don't think that's because the American people are thoughtful. I think it's because the indoctrination changed, right? We were pushing indoctrination against the communists, and then we changed it to the Islamists, and we stopped indoctrinating people against the communists. And now we're trying to push it back. And
that's true. I mean, that is true. I mean, and that's, people, and it is a little, it's more than a little distressing. It's really distressing how quickly you can propagandize people in Western countries. You don't, like in China, I think every nation of people has a short list of people they could potentially go to war with. Like China might have a war with Taiwan.
That's itself.
Russia, right? There's. I mean, my point is that they know, like, if a war in that within that list of people, they're like, okay, we're having a war with these guys. It's not a surprise. Everybody in that country kind of understood. Okay, we were having problems with them. We understand that, but I think what makes people in NATO countries exceptional is that it just takes a couple months of propaganda to make them hate somebody like a blood enemy, even if they've never even heard of that country, even if they cannot find that country on a map. Like, no one cared about, like, before 9/11, no one cared about Arabs, or no one cared about Afghanistan. I mean, Afghanistan, we support the gallant freedom fighters of Afghanistan, but then they said, oh, well, these people are our enemy. We have to kill them all. And it's concerning. That's so easy to flip people.
That is a great point. And it is. I mean, it's a tremendous problem. I mean, they can, these propaganda offensives are so, brilliant and effective. They're very effective. And even when they're not completely effective, because like only the 40 or 50% of stupid people really buy into them, that's all they need. Because how do we know? I mean, and then the media will just pretend that it's 95%, even when it's only 40. But people don't know any better, and that's how they push these things down our throats. But I would like to play this clip. It was a fascinating clip. Patrick Clausen, he's at some think tank. This back in 2011 or 2012. But I just want you guys to listen to what he's saying. He's saying so many things, and then let's just talk about it on the other side. But let me try and play this.
Didn't work. Did you press the present button?
Oh, did I not?
No, you did not.
Okay. Let me try again. It's amateur hour. Bear with me.
Should be able to hit the present button, and then that
Yeah.
window should come up.
Well, I
on
just did
screen.
it when I didn't mean to, and now that I'm meaning to, I'm not. So let's see. Share screen. Okay. This time it's for reals. Here we go. Listen to this.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Which leads me to conclude that if, in fact, compromise is not coming, that the traditional way of America gets to war is what would be best for U.S. interests. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the USS Wayne exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing, which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
So that was fun, right? I saw that on, I think Jimmy Dore maybe played that clip, and it's just, very interesting. So
the thing is,
go ahead.
Go ahead. If you had a thought, it sounds like you were.
I was just going to talk about, all of these, he goes through the history and the implication is that, these weren't these wars didn't get started by what we're told, in school about, the assassination of the Archduke just caused World War I. Okay. But there's other factors at play, and he talks about crisis initiation, right? What can we do so that we can have a justification for this war? And so, yeah, I fully believe that the Maine was not blown up by Spain, right? I think that was a false flag. The Gulf of Tonkin was obviously not, just an attack on by Vietnam against the United States. That was also a false flag. So obviously the Japanese did attack Pearl Harbor, but we probably knew it was coming, and we probably gave them no choice. We probably forced them into it, and we're expecting it, and we're happy it happened. So, and then, this idea that we're just going to, Iran is something we want to take out, and our struggle is to figure out, how to initiate that crisis to allow us to do it. Of course, that was back in 2011. And since then, I don't think people really wanted, the establishment, the ruling establishment. Israel obviously wanted us to attack Iran, back in the 90s, and we haven't. And I think that's because of, Iran has a deterrent that they can, crash the global economy, at least the energy market, by taking a lot of the global energy offline. And that would cause a global economic crisis. And that has been a deterrent for them. But now that the United States is interested in weakening China and cutting China off of, Middle Eastern energy, like, it's not such a deterrent. Like, their ability to block the Strait of Hormuz and stop, Mid-Eastern energy exports to China, that's kind of an enticement as opposed to a barrier. So,
I don't think we want a direct war with Iran, and the reason I say that is that we kind of shot our shot already with the global war on terror. What happens after 9/11, I don't think can be replicated, and I think everybody understands it can't be replicated. If there's a Gulf of Tonkin incident, or let's say Russia strikes an American base in Poland, or Iran hits an American base in Syria, or something like that. Who's really at this point and I don't mean, people who talk about on the internet. I mean, who in the American population is actually going to say, I want to go fight in Iran? I mean, because that's the thing. And people, and there's this idea that, you can send a few thousand troops somewhere and they'll win in a week with no casualties. But even the 2003 invasion of Iraq, I don't think we could even do that anymore. I don't think there's the political means to tell 250,000 National Guard and Army Reserve personnel, oh, hey, guess what? You're going to Iran next month. And of course, Iran is not Saddam's Iraq. There would be serious casualties if we attempted a war with them. I just don't think people buy those false flag attacks like they used to. And I don't think people are going to rush to the recruiting office to do that either. And I don't think, we did have this, I remember even on this show, we had this debate about, is the military woke? And is that the reason recruiting declined? And at the time I said, no, that might factor into it. But the big thing is that people who are military age don't want to enlist and possibly die in Ukraine or in Iran. They understand there's a high enough probability of going to war. They just don't want to do it. They don't want to fight in a war. And so that's why recruiting is down.
I kind of see a war against Iran as using the Navy, the Air Force, the proxies, and Israel, and maybe some other, the proxies being, of course, the terrorists that are now in Syria. And maybe the Turks, and then some Arabian states, that's who I see. I don't see. Yeah, I think it's totally not politically viable for the U.S. to put American boots on the ground to occupy Iran. I don't think anybody suggests that. But a real big regime change effort would involve massive carpet bombing, which would lead to U.S. casualties for sure. American pilots would be shot down, and maybe Navy ships would be sunk. But
it's very telling that there's not a single U.S. carrier within missile range of Iran.
And I think Scott Ritter, maybe not Scott, maybe it was Scott and some other people made the point that those are an antiquated, military weapon, that now they're just kind of with hypersonics, with pinpoint, precision missiles. Aircraft carriers are no longer a tool that can be used like they used to be able to be used. Now they're just kind of big floating coffins. And so he was saying, you'll know as long as there's a carrier in the area, that war is not imminent. But if the carriers are removed, then that war could be a likelihood. And I think that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But hey, Patrick, what did you think about that clip? Like, what struck you? What stuck out to you?
I think we all have a kind of limited view of what propaganda and things like false flag attacks are. I think those are important tools in the Imperial toolkit, but they're not by any means all of them. They're used in ways that work on an emotional level for people to get them to the place they want them to be in order to accept that. I agree with the points about the unlikelihood of I think perhaps Iraq was the last example of substantial American boots on the ground. I think their aim now is to do everything through proxies. And I think if they're going to go after Iran, it would be Syria writ big. That they do have a penchant for using the same playbook. That's why I think a lot of people now, to their consternation, they being the oligarchs, react to events, whether they are or not staged events. They react to them as if they are, because that's what they've been led to. That's the process of waking up, and then on on continuing the play, they have to find ways to counteract people's genuinely with shows like this, with other avenues. It's interesting because over the COVID area, the medical profession and the press the mainstream press took two of the biggest hits. The
Science.
lack of trust in the medical profession is astounding. I just hear people in everyday coffee shop conversation talking about, well, that would mean I'd have to go to the hospital, and I can't do that. When have you ever heard people talking like that before? So in a way, that encourages me. But seeing as I've got the mic, I would like to raise something. When we talk about Russia, I think we have, and you see a line over the last, what I'll call it 20 years, but it's more than that. It actually goes at least back to the Second World War. What is it that that the big capitalists want from Russia? It's the same thing that Hitler wanted, which is just look at the circumstances of Russia. It's got is it the largest or the second largest landmass in the world? It's got a moderate population, and it's got far more than its share of resources. So what do they want? They want a land that is only moderately populated, but it's what capitalists want in late stage capitalism. They want like that gives them another 50 to 100 years of resources to exploit and control, and they had it in their hand. They had Russia by the balls, and somebody let go.
Putin ruined everything. I also wanted to add that with climate change, Russia will soon have a beautiful tropical climate as well. So they'll have everything going for them. That's the only drawback for me right now is how cold it is. But if that changes, man, it'll be a real awesome place.
The summers are normal. The summers in Russia are actually very hot. It's quite interesting.
Short, hot summers, yeah.
Yes. I think what Patrick just said about the want of Russia's resources. I would also add that it's the only remaining large state in Europe, because the European empires, you had some neo-colonial, you definitely had a period of neo-colonialism after the official end of European colonialism, but all of those countries are small now. You had the British Empire, which at one point was the strongest empire in the world. You had France, you had Germany, but all those empires are gone, and now you just have Russia. But the problem with Russia is that if you look at any points, and there are tribes, there are ethnic minorities in Russia, but if you go to almost any place in Russia, you'll see mostly just Russians, even in areas that have a large non-Russian population. Generally, for the most part, it's at least 50% Russian. So you have this large Russian state of Russians, and I kind of see this from talking to Europeans and from reading what they say on the internet and in the news and their commentaries. They're pretty bitter about it. Really imagine being a British person or a French person. You see, in the last century, we had this great empire. Now we don't. And we're also kind of under the USA's boot. And meanwhile, you have Russia, which is still the largest country in the world. And there's no sign of that changing. Just remember the excitement in 2022 when they were posting all those silly maps of how they were going to carve up Russia and which country would rule this part of Russia. They were so excited, and they were so disappointed when that didn't happen.
Yes. So Dust was adding that it's not just take the resources, but Russia and China really as a power that keeps the United States or the West in general from being able to do whatever they want around the planet. And so when we tried to take out Assad the first time, without Russia, we would have taken him out the first time, right? And so it was due to Russia that he didn't fall. And then so it's not just the resources, but it's the geopolitics. And the United States is after total global hegemony, which includes political domination, military domination, informational domination. They don't want any other narratives out there. They don't want any other political powers interfering and telling them you can't do this. So that's what, and it's what's the word? Inexorable. It's the inexorable drive for total global domination, and they just can't help themselves. So that's the struggle of our age, and it's really coming to a point here at the end of the 2020s. If China can maintain their growth and their development, if Russia can maintain its strength and power, and that's the big struggle. The U.S. is just trying to weaken these powers so they can dominate the planet with impunity throughout the rest of the 21st century, like they did in the last half of the 20th century. Don't let me rush us off, but we have been going for an hour and 20 minutes. But I'm happy to discuss other topics, but my mind can't think of any at the moment.
Well, I think I don't have anything else to say. I would just give a closing thought that part of what the Soviet Union did on the global stage was arming, like what Dust was just saying. And part of what, the biggest component of that was that the Soviet Union armed the global South, because there were independence movements dating from the early 20th century or even before that, but you cannot overthrow an imperial army with sticks and stones. So what the Soviet Union did was this mass armament of the global South. And when you're, and then by that point, these European armies and administrations were already outnumbered because global populations exploded. But now they also had modern weapons. So that gap between the colonizer and the colonized narrowed a lot. And that was enough to end those European empires like the French in Algeria or in Indochina. It was over. And what Russia is doing in Africa now, well, it's the same thing. And I would say it's because the Russians were always better imperialists than Americans. And what I mean by that is that Russians were always very good at diplomacy and always had a mindset that favored cooperation with other people, because that's why I say I think actually a good imperialist will also make a good communist. I know some people would kill me for saying that, but I think it's true. The Russian Empire was very good at reaching out to these indigenous tribes. And I wouldn't say the Russian Empire was nice and all, just rainbows and unicorns, but they were good at building administrations that the locals found to be tolerable. And that carried over into the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union did this, had this idea of global communism, which actually, it didn't spring up out of thin air, because the Russian Empire was already good at that. So Russians as Soviets, as communists, went to East Asia, went to Africa, went to Latin America, and it's very easy for them to build. Well, that's true. Okay. I like I said, I know communists would kill me for saying this, but my point is it's diplomacy. It's diplomacy. Americans were never good at it. We're not even good at speaking the local language. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the number of American state or military employees who can speak Arabic, you could probably count without taking your shoes off. I don't think that's even an exaggeration to say.
Yeah.
So Russian diplomacy was always better, and that's not new. So that's my closing thought for you.
Well, while you were talking, I had 100 thoughts, and now I don't have any.
Oh, no.
I have a thought. While you're talking, if you say that Russians were always good at diplomacy, I would say Americans somewhat make up for that by being good at geopolitics. And as a final thought for me, I wonder sometimes just if you look at the progress of NATO towards the Russian border and how that increasingly put pressure on Russia, and until finally they made their move into Ukraine, how much further were they thinking outside of that, they being the U.S., outside of that theater of war, in terms of look how that played into the fall of Syria. Now, I'm not saying, that they were planning it so precisely, but certainly as a geopolitical move, tying up Russia is a pretty good damn idea.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
The timing was definitely interesting. And I have this idea that they were just desperate to give Biden a legacy. Because every president is entitled to a presidential library. Like Clinton has his, Reagan has his, Bush, even Bush has his. What would you even put in the Biden library? What one good thing has Biden done in his entire? I don't think it's even an exaggeration to say Biden is one of the worst presidents we've ever had in our history. I would say the only person who came who is about as bad as Biden was Johnson. I don't mean the 20th century Johnson. I mean 19th century Johnson before Lincoln, because Johnson's inadequacies caused that divide between North and South. So I'd say Biden is that bad. It was every day of the Biden presidency was an embarrassment on the national stage. I mean, having this guy who doesn't know where he is half the time, wandering. Did you see that, Patrick? Did you see that video of Biden wandering into the jungle? He was,
in Brazil. Yeah.
Yes, in Brazil. He gave a speech and then he turned around, wandered off into the jungle, and there were these jokes. Did he just get lost in the jungle? Are we ever going to see him again? I mean, it was an embarrassment.
I missed that.
But so I think Syria saying, they can say, well, Biden as a strong, resolute president took down the Assad regime and ended his reign of terror, of chemical weapons and all this other crap. He has something, because before that he had nothing. So maybe it's just they want to have one thing they can say Biden accomplished.
Provoking World War III before Trump came in will be his big. It'll be his big thing on his presidential library. So you talked about the Cold War was really the hot war in the third world, right? So the Cold War had hot wars all over Africa, Central and South America, and it was proxy wars. It was popular socialist governments against the Western-backed radical, either narco-terrorists or head choppers or Nazis, depending on the geographic location. But what do you think? Okay, so North Korea, everybody is saying, everybody by the West, like in the Western press, it is given as a fact. But when you check the sources for North Koreans fighting in the Kursk region, the sources always go back to Ukraine. So, but the West still puts it out there as fact. So they say, North Korea is fighting Ukraine in the Kursk region. They have, troops on the ground fighting Ukraine. Inevitably, it's sourced to Ukraine says that, and they're not always upfront about what their source is, but it's always Ukraine saying that. So to me, like if North Koreans are getting, experience, real battle experience in modern warfare, I think that's great. But because every source is Ukraine, I'm still dubious. Are you still dubious, Ian, or I know before you were like, absolutely not. There's no North Koreans.
Well, I think it's not even. I mean, Ukraine, of course, has every motive to say, "Hey, look at all these foreign troops helping Russia violate our sovereign." What are they? I forget what territorial sovereignty or whatever they call it. I think it's even further than that. It's South Korea, because South Korea was the first to start the hysteria about North Korean troops. Yeah. And I think that actually that theory that is just South Korea talking out of their ass is validated by, what's his name, Yoon, trying to do a coup. It's just South Korea has very troubled colonial history because they were a brutal military junta. Like I remember when I was actually at boot camp. I was at Marine Corps boot camp, and they had a Korean War veteran, and this was in 2007. So he was, even at the time, he was probably like in his 80s. But he came in, he talked about his experience in Korea, and he mentioned that even American servicemen were shocked by how brutal the South Koreans were. Like they saw, like if you did some minor disciplinary infraction, they would torture you. Like they would put you in those, I forget what they're called, those boxes where you're forced to squat in the box and there's the spikes on the floor. They would do things like they would force you to, like during a parade inspection, if the officer was upset with you, he would make you hold your rifle in front of you, and when he was done with the inspection, he came back around to you, and if you had gotten tired and lowered your rifle, you would be shot. You would just be shot on the spot. Like so Americans were just shocked by how how brutal the South Korean regime was. There was, of course, the Communist Party in North Korea, and when they would capture villages, of course, the Communist Party would establish infrastructure there. And because party members would get privileges, like maybe higher rations or something, like a lot of people would just join the communist. They weren't necessarily even sympathetic to communism. They just wanted the extra food because they were starving. But then when South Korea retook the village, anybody who joined the Communist Party or had sympathized with them or had done anything that could be perceived as sympathy, they would execute them. It was brutal. And now, South Korea isn't brutal anymore, but they're still colonized by Western troops. And their government's kind of, they went from being a junta to a joke. And they're kind of a joke now. Yoon isn't the first president who's kind of a joke. So I can see them being under a lot of political pressure to just try to be relevant. So saying North Korea, our arch nemesis, is helping Russia invade Ukraine might be politically beneficial to draw attention to themselves.
Yeah, and who knows what plans were actually existed behind that failed coup that lasted a few hours. There's a lot of speculation about what that was all about, and you may never know, obviously. But yeah, to think that it's not having to do with what's going on in Ukraine would be stupid. Brian, as always, is promoting the excellent success of our Lord and Savior Joseph Stalin. Thank you for that, Brian. I'm fasting. I'm eating one meal a day, and I can tell that my brain isn't working because I haven't eaten since yesterday about this time. So I want to thank Patrick. Patrick, I really appreciate your input. I'm going to invite you back often. I hope you enjoy yourself. And Ian, as always, I appreciate your co-hosting with me. I was hoping Carlo would jump in, and I hope Ben gets not so busy with work and he can join us sometime soon. But we're going to shoot for Friday. We're going to shoot for another episode this Friday. We've been really delinquent over the holidays, but I do enjoy these streams. So thanks again, and we will see everybody hopefully on Friday. See you then.
Okay.